Dennison, can you tell the story of Dope Wars?
Yeah, I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, totally. It's kind of both. It's both really simple, but kind of like beautiful at the same time. Basically, I saw loot, and we mentioned this a little bit earlier, but I saw loot. I thought, oh wow, that's really cool, but I don't get into like potions and magic and dragons and shit. Like it just never was my thing.
It's Dope Wars for you.
Yeah, I mean, for better, I grew up in a city. I was like in an urban area. Like I used to play Dope Wars on the TI-83 calculator. So I just said out loud on Twitter, and there was one learning that I did there that I think made all the difference. It felt good to me. So I just created the Discord first, which I think is all the difference. I created the Discord first, and I said, if you were also like me, not into like the dragons and stuff like that, but you love this energy around loot, come build Dope Wars, right? And kind of by, I like put out the tweet, walked away from my community, from the computer. And like by the time I got back, like, a few minutes later, there was like thousands of people in the Discord. They created like a Word doc where everyone like community was adding all the things that they wanted on the NFTs. Someone was writing some of the smart contracts. Like they were just like self-organizing right away. I was kind of like shocked. But the thing that I kind of did was I saw what Loot had done, and I kind of instantly knew that there would be a little bit of a power vacuum of how it worked because it's so permissionless, right? It's like whatever you folks want to do with it, you can do something with it. But I've been on this like hype train of like trying to like get governance into everything and like NFTs. I was really like digging Nouns DAO. And I was like, well, let's put the Nouns DAO NFT into the project so that the actual NFT holders can do voting on what happens. And on top of that, I said, I'm going to take nothing from this, right? Like there's no secret mint. The loot contract had like a special privilege function for Dom where he got to mint, X number of like NFTs for free for himself. So I'm taking that completely out. There's nothing for me that's privileged here. I hope that you folks refund the gas fees and let's have at it. And the other key thing I said was there'll be a 5% royalties on OpenSea that go to fund directly the DAO treasury, and that's what the NFT holders can vote on spending, right? So anyway, did that, deployed it. Everyone sort of like, aped in. People got really excited. Some close friends of mine saw it and were like, oh, I remember the game. I love it. Actually, Terrence is here who can, at this point, tell the story even better than me because he like basically called me the night that I put out that tweet. He was like, oh my God, where's the Discord? I want to get involved. And, I kind of like closed my computer, walked away from it. And came back, and there's like all these like different, groups in Discord. They've all organized. People are talking about what it's going to be, what it's going to look like. And I think a real major turning point was this guy, Mr. Fax, showed up. He's an artist, and he started making the pixel art versions of the NFTs before himself, right? Because he was like, oh, I like it. Hey, guys, this is what I made. And people were like, oh, we love it. Can you make it for everybody, right? Like all 8,000 of us. And, oh, by the way, there's like $500,000 in the treasury now from this just like initial enthusiasm of people flipping it. We'll pay you. So they did a proposal, an on-chain vote that paid him. And Terrence can, I almost feel bad. He's in the audience, and like he has been really one of the like core members there. I just really came up with the idea. So the kind of amazing thing here is that they created this NFT DAO, right? This community where the point was to spend this treasury, and there isn't a connection between the NFT and your money other than the vote, right? Like when we see other governances, other DAOs like Uniswap, the token holders themselves, there's kind of like this tension between spending the money in the treasury and the token holders who get to decide on how to spend the money, right? Because every dollar that comes out or every uni that comes out of the uni treasury dilutes the participants who voted to spend that money a bit, right? So the very first like Uniswap thing, there had been like a mistake on how it was distributed, and there was a vote to like give the people who should have been part of the airdrop tokens, and people were like, no, screw you. Like, we already have the money distributed. I'm not going to dilute myself. So by sort of like having this idea of like an NFT DAO where the NFT controls the money, but like you spending that money doesn't devalue your NFT, right? The value of your NFT is its own thing based on its rarity or how much people want it. Suddenly you had a community where it's very clear from the beginning. The point of this community is to spend the money in this treasury to try and make a game, right? And what's happened from that is people feel pretty happy to spend the money. People aren't attached to the money in the treasury. So they propose things like artwork, Starkware, Layer 2, this new like game piece that had been built, the Hustlers. They're actually voting on creating a hip hop album, a LP. There's actual music producers in the group who are like, we want to make a Dope Wars soundtrack. And the result of all these people having ideas of how to spend the money has actually driven more participation, so that now after, this period of time of just spending money, they actually have twice as much money in the treasury, right? So it's become this sort of like perpetual motion machine of people coming up with cool ideas, which bring in more people who want to help implement and participate in it. I mean, I really feel that like at this point, we should, if Terrence is willing to like talk a little bit about it, but maybe you don't want to get into like a shill-a-thon here. It's really kind of wild, the challenges that DAO has gone through, because there's been a lot, and the opportunities and the sort of like things that I am even learning from them how to do, right? Like if you had asked me a year ago, should a DAO even consider proposals like, hey, I'm a musician and I want to make a hip hop album around the idea of your DAO, I would have thought that was a crazy idea. I would have said, no, absolutely. But this community has really shown me that, and again, this goes to my thinking that maybe what's happening is lifestyles are being created and like identities are being created. If you can have a structure that allows all these ideas to like flourish, actually just drives more people who feel like, oh, this community is a place that I can build something, right, where I can contribute. I think now they have like an animation studio in like Indonesia working on like animating the characters. I think there's like a collaboration like with World Wide Web going on. All this crazy stuff where you're like, oh my God. And it really comes from that sort of lifestyle feeling of a DAO where people really feel like it's important to be a part of something, more than, we pooled our money to make investments to, do X.
So take me through the tokenomics quickly, just once again. So you drop the contract. It's sort of a spin on Loot. The piece that you integrated from Nouns was the governance aspect of Nouns?
Yes. So this is a key thing. And actually, I was just talking to Open Zeppelin. I believe that it is in this release, because they just merged the PR, where they are adding this to the Open Zeppelin contract library. So now anyone's going to be able to do it the same way they make a regular NFT. But basically, the NFT itself can be used on chain to vote. So the other token voting like governances or DAOs, you have some ERC20, and the number of ERC20 tokens you have is your voting power, right? Well, in this case, it's your NFT is your voting power. And this is kind of proving to be, for a lot of social organizations, a better abstraction of participation, because people are voting with their NFT, which is already kind of like an avatar of themselves. So you can imagine in the Doodle DAO, you're voting with your avatar, which is sort of some weird extension of who you are, right? But because of that, there isn't this, we talked a little bit earlier about the sort of like vagueness of, is a multi-sig a DAO? In this case, you don't have that. Dope Wars is special and has sort of avoided some of the the chaos that you've seen elsewhere, where there is no one with a privileged piece of power. There's no small group of multi-sig holders that control the protocol, right? The token holders in Dope Wars have absolute final say on how the DAO treasury is spent, absolutely, from the beginning. And that means that you don't have this thing of like, a cohort of like leaders who are sort of like making the decisions for everybody else and using a snapshot to sort of like inform their decision. But it also addresses a lot of the legal concerns, right? Like this is, by the people, for the people, in sort of like a funny way. And that distinction, I think, is really important because from day one, it's actually a true DAO. And yeah, it's messy, super messy, but I think that also makes it really resilient because it's not, there isn't like a core dev team that can like turn against you and say, no, we're not going to finance a hip hop album, right? Like, if somebody had asked me directly, Dennison, will you finance a hip hop album? I would probably have said bad idea. But then if you don't have any control over that, you say, well, sure. I mean, what do the people think? And then turns out the people wanted chip tunes. So they're going to like do chip tunes. And they're like, well, okay, well, if we're going to do a hip hop album, can we also get some soundtracks for the game in 8-bit style? Okay, we'll throw that in. That's the compromise. We'll do the hip hop, but we also have to have like chip tunes. And we also have to have this for the game. And suddenly you're like, oh my God, no one person or even small group of people can know what's best. These communities kind of have to find out how to do that. And that like Park Slope co-op problem of like people show up and they don't know where things are and they have to get on the microphone and ask where the cheese is very real. But they do that a couple times and then someone new joins the DAO, and when that person gets on the microphone and says, hey, where's the cheese? That person before is the first one to answer the call, right? So
I have a technical question for you. So Nouns DAO is a fork of Compound, right? And so
Correct.
This is a fork of that, or maybe even, a fork in the sense that it's exactly the same thing, or I guess made to be better integrated with the loot derivative contract that Dope Wars started with.
Yes. Yeah, it's a Frankenstein.
No,
but
it's beautiful.
Works.
It's a synthesis. So, but I did notice that there is a Dope DAO. So first of all, Dope Wars is on Tally. You can check out Dope Wars on Tally. Yeah. I do wish this, I was thinking about this when I looked at Tally the other day, but I wish I could tell which governance technology they were using.
Oh, which governance? I thought you were going to say which NFT voted.
I do want to see the pictures of the NFT, but because when you were saying, of course, like if it's your avatar, like obviously the problem is that there are whales who have many, many NFTs from an individual collection, but nevertheless, if they're very involved in the governance of the community, they probably have at least one that they're using as an avatar. So of course it would be sick to have their images next to the votes.
Yeah.
But I wish Tally showed like Compound or a link to the GitHub or something.
First of all, you're absolutely right, and we are working on a new version, which will be out still. There's still a little time before that comes out, but absolutely, we've got a lot of feedback around that. The other half of that answer is like right now, all of the DAOs on Tally are actually Compound DAOs. We had been opinionated. We will be less opinionated going forward, but we had been opinionated.
So then, what's the snapshot for, or is Dope DAO the name of the DAO for Dope Wars?
Yes, yeah. So Dope Wars has a snapshot to do the voting on chain is expensive. We know when we started Tally, it was not nearly as expensive as it is today. So snapshot is an integral part of the sort of decision making process to figure out. Okay, because something that happens in the Dope Wars community, which is interesting, is they roll together votes. So improvement, dips, dope improvement proposals, they get rolled together into proposals. When it goes on chain, so as to not like take up everybody's time and money in terms of voting. So the snapshot is a way that they sort of like decide what's going to get rolled into there, and sort of like free ways of deciding things.
Is that Gnosis reality tech? Is that how they do that?
No. So the Gnosis reality tech is a whole nother thing. But the snapshot is not the actual final vote. And this is a part of the sort of awareness thing that we have definitely got to get better at, and the sort of like ecosystem as a whole. No, the snapshot is just used to get a temperature check to see like where people are thinking. And then anyone can make the actual on-chain proposal, via Tally, but any other interface as well. And then the treasury is on-chain. It's not multi-sig controlled; it's time lock controlled. So the token holders, anyone can make a proposal, and who has like enough support and then have it pass and basically control the treasury. But there is a note that I do want to get back to you on, because you mentioned how you have whales that hold lots of NFTs, and that is very true. But something that we've found when talking to people as part of our sort of customer research at Tally is that people don't mind that as much. What we've noticed is, especially when it comes to participation, when you vote, if you have one token out of a trillion tokens, voting feels like one teardrop in an ocean, right? Like when you go to Uniswap or something like that, where there's just billions of outstanding tokens and you've got one vote and you're like, okay, here's my vote. It doesn't feel great. And when you have whales that have $1 billion worth of token and you've $2 worth of token, it doesn't feel great, right? And all the tooling that exists in the ecosystem around ERC20s exists to show how much ERC20 you have, right? I have $1 million worth of this ERC20, right? And they always show you, oh, this person holds this amount of uni and that's worth this amount of dollars, right? So that actually creates in communities a kind of weird feeling. It's not great for small holders. But the difference is in NFT DAOs, first of all, the number of participants tends to be smaller. There's an upper limit of non-divisible items, which is generally 8,000 or 10,000 NFTs. But the thing is, when your NFT votes, your NFT still voted. And the tooling is such that when someone who has 100 NFT votes, it's still each one of those individual NFTs voting. And eventually these people may sell these different NFTs, and these NFTs will still participate in other votes or can participate in other votes. So there's this aspect, and this is something we want to expose more on Tally when it comes to see which NFT voted. You have a doodle. If you vote at the doodle bank, which you should because they have trouble reaching quorum on the snapshot, your doodle voted, right? Your doodle 4568, whichever one you have, they voted. And that's a very interesting avatar of participation in a community where this is already an avatar of you and it has a say. And it doesn't really matter if someone else has 30 different says, but they're still individual avatars of a member of an organization. And probably the ideal state is to eventually get your organization to have a 1-to-1 ratio. And if you look at OpenSea, it's really interesting to sort of gauge how fairly distributed these communities are, where you see, oh, there's 10,000 pieces and 5,000 holders. And then you can think, oh, well, on average, people hold 2, right? And suddenly, when it comes to participating, it feels a lot better because it's not just your one token in a sea of billions.
So 4156 would have a voting history. It's interesting because it kind of turns on its head the delegation thing. It seems like delegation is really important for ERC20 token voting because it's so hard to get people to have the bandwidth to pay attention to every little governance thing going on in every little DAO that they're a minor stakeholder in. So delegation seems like a really important piece of ERC20 voting. But in this case, you could almost imagine a circumstance in which, 4156, whatever it was yesterday, did vote or to rage quit in the end, but the NFT still has a voting history that will continue. I find that's the biggest question about the identity of the 4156 one is really the one that's brought it up for me. How do we treat the person who takes, if they do in fact take that on as a Twitter avatar, how are we going to treat them? It's people selling, what is it one of the Spartan DeFi pumponomics kind of people sold their account a little while ago, right? 4 or 5 months ago or something. And, or there was, what was it horse ebooks or whatever sold. It was a poetry, seemingly autonomous poetry bot, but actually a human behind it, and they sold it or something like this, or they became public. It's the changes in the identity with the way that these things get used it really isn't just a low issuance ERC20 with a picture. It does have some kind of, the human mind does kind of want to turn it into a narrative at all costs.
I think that's what's going to be really powerful. One of our former colleagues had a really great thesis around these avatars as brands unto themselves. And if you sell them, all that brand equity doesn't disappear. It just goes with the.
It seems there's some attrition though, right? Like part of what we liked about 4156 was that they were really smart. Like as 4156, and I'm curious about the Twitter handle, because my joke about it is if the copyright doesn't come with owning a punk, then surely the Twitter account doesn't either.
Well, yeah, I mean, I would say that I threw out a project. It's on my GitHub called NFTNS, which was around this idea. It's actually from a 2016 project they did at Buenos Aires, which was called Kittygram, where you could take photos with your CryptoKitty and it got saved on chain, but the CryptoKitty owns it. And when somebody buys a CryptoKitty, they would buy it not just for the CryptoKitty, but it's like album of photos of like who owned it before.
Very cool.
I think that idea starts to play here again, where, for NFTNS, the idea was that the avatar is the thing that matters. And who is custodying the avatar is almost not relevant and not important, right? Because in this like funny way, these avatars are going to like outlive us, right? Like they're never going to go away, right? Especially if it's like stored on Arweave. This stuff is going to go on for like hundreds of years, right? So we are kind of just like custodians of the NFT in a really strange way. Right, like Nicholas, you have a doodle, but that doodle doesn't really belong to you. Right, you just sort of get to custody it, and I love that concept. And I think that when we talk about communities, especially when we start to talk about like the metaverse, which is a term that I unfortunately hate, and even the idea I kind of hate, but these are going to be their own sovereign things, and we're just going to custody them.
Yeah, it's true. If anything, I belong to the doodle for this part of time. And then either I'll liquidate it or some heir of mine will, or it'll be lost with a wallet that gets lost. And yeah, I really have no control.